Hey, Katie. We have The Message in the Hollow Oak. We're on chapter 20, last chapter. Kit and Caboodle. So usually the expression like whole kit and caboodle is like the whole thing. This is kind of a play on words. Nancy and her friends whirled to see who had ordered her to hand over the treasure. Cadle! Beside him stood a man with a gun. Nancy's heart sank. After all her hard work, was she going to have to surrender her discovery to a thief? Defiantly, she asked, "Why should I give this to you?" "Never mind the reason," Cadle shouted angrily. "Come here, all of you!" Bess, trembling, started to walk ahead. Dave stepped to her side. The next moment, Nancy, Ned, and George spotted two state troopers hurrying toward them among the trees. The three friends exchanged looks. Then, playing for time, Nancy continued to oppose Cadle. "What would you do with this?" she asked. "And how much would you pay for it?" "Don't be ridiculous," Cadle shouted, stepping forward a pace. Bess turned her head. "You'd better do as he says, Nancy. We don't want to get hurt." "She's right," Cadle called out. Before he could move again, the trooper sprang from the woods and seized the two men. "Hey, what's going on here?" Cadle sputtered. The man with him looked thunderstruck at being disarmed. One of the troopers said, "We've been looking for you a long time. You're wanted on several counts, and now we can add to the list threatening the lives of these young people." "It's a lie," Cadle blustered. He pointed to Nancy. "She has something that belongs to me." The trooper asked Nancy, "Is this true?" "Of course not," she replied. "I'd say if this property belongs to anyone, it would be to the state of Illinois. I promised to turn it in." She told the officers a little of the mystery on which she was working. "It's lucky you arrived when you did," Ned said to the troopers. "How did you find us? Did our friends tell you?" "No, we haven't seen them." "They've taken the phony cards to jail." Cadle winced at hearing this. The trooper went on. "We were hiding near the well house and spotted you going through the woods. A few minutes later, Cadle and his pal came along, following you. We trailed them, figuring we'd catch the two in action." Ned turned to Cadle. "Then you never did go to the well house to pick up the ransom?" Cadle shook his head. "When I noticed you were heading in this direction, I was sure you were up to something, and I'd better find out what it was." Dave said, "There was a nice fat sack of paper and stones waiting for you at the well house." Cadle scowled. "I might have known Nancy Drew would pull a trick on me." Seeing that his position was hopeless, he talked freely. Nancy learned the answers to some of the questions which had puzzled her. The two men who had later posed as museum guards had come to the dig soon after her arrival and called out her name softly at the bedroom window. They were supposed to get Nancy to step outside and then kidnap her so she could not pursue her search for the message in the hollow oak. The men had also stolen Clem's goat to frighten her in the dark bedroom. "But nothing worked," Cadle admitted. One of his men left a note on the farmhouse bureau, hoping to scare Nancy off the case. Cadle had planned to steal the fossils and artifacts in the excavation in the barn, and admitted to posing as Tom Wilson. "Whenever I thought it wasn't safe for me to appear, I gave the job to my men." Nancy asked, "Did you mutilate an oak tree in your search for the real hollow oak?" Cadle admitted doing it. George spoke up. "How did you learn Nancy Drew was on the case?" Cadle replied, "When I couldn't get any information from Armstrong about the hollow oak, I flew east and spied on other detectives. I overheard Boise Osborne saying Nancy Drew from River Heights was taking over. I managed to get on the same flight with her to St. Louis." The trooper asked if the prisoners had any more to say. They shook their heads and were led away. "Now, let's see what's inside this hunting horn," Nancy suggested. I believe a hunting horn would be like a horn to blow when people were hunting. It's like as a signal. While Ned held the beautiful instrument, she put her hand down inside the tube. Her fingers touched something metal. She pulled out a heavy, solid gold solid gold chain and cross. That's exquisite, Bess exclaimed. And worth a fortune, I'll bet, Dave added. Next, Nancy removed a man's large signet ring with a religious design on it. She tugged at the next piece, but could not move it. Finally, she said, Ned, you try. The object was wedged in tightly. Ned rocked the horn from side to side, and finally the metal object in it gave way. He pulled out a slender brass box. This is a surveyor's kit, Dave remarked as Nancy raised the lid. Pierre Francois must have been a surveyor as well as a missionary. I believe a surveyor is like he's kind of like checking out the land. Carefully, Nancy removed an egg-shaped piece of metal with a rotted fragment of string attached to it. That's a plumb bob, said Ned. It hangs on the end of a line to find the center of gravity. And here's a compass, George added. What's this? Nancy asked, picking up a brass tube. Pierre Francois could have used that for sightseeing, said Ned. Today we would look through a telescopic instrument called a transit. Nancy slid her finger into the tube. Something's in here, she exclaimed, and pulled out a tiny roll of paper. It must be the message that tells about the treasure. The handwriting on the letter proved to be in French, and some of the words were old-fashioned, but Nancy managed to translate them. She read aloud. This tree is 1/4 mile east from an ancient Indian burial mound. It is large, overgrown, and the rounded top is gone. I dug into it from the side and found fine objects. Then war came. I put them back and filled in the hole. The Iroquois are destroying the Algonquin, 2 different tribes of Native Americans. The last village I was in was attacked, and I fled, but the arrow wound I received is festering, and I shall die. I will hide my few precious possessions in this hollow oak. Then I will put a note in a light crock, seal it, and send it downstream. I pray the note will be picked up by a settler. These belongings were brought to me from France, to New France. As Nancy paused, George remarked, New France is now Canada, isn't it? Yes, Nancy answered, then went on reading. I have marked my journey from one Indian village to another by placing lead plates I brought from France upon oak trees near Indian settlements. Arrows I made on the signs showed the direction of my travels. One plate is left which has no arrow. I will use it to mark this tree. The young people stood silent, awed by what they had just seen and heard, and learned. Finally, Ned said, Nancy, I don't believe you realize what a tremendous find you've made. The young detective merely smiled. Evidently someone found the crock with the note, and the story became a legend. George patted her friend on the back, and then Nancy Drew turned the legend into a true story. Carrying the copper box with the fabulous hunting horn with them, Nancy and her friends returned to the farmhouse. As the truck clattered in, Teresa and the young archaeologists began appearing from all directions to find out what their friends had learned. It must have been a good day, said Julie Ann. You're all smiling. Nancy jumped down and said, My smile is as wide as the Illinois River country. She told of their finding Bob and the capture of Cadel and his pals. How marvelous! Julie Ann exclaimed. Ned and Dave now lifted down the copper box. Nancy opened it and displayed the beautiful hunting horn. The first one to speak up was Claire Warwick. What kind of message is that? The others ignored her and asked Nancy to show them the other treasures. Finally, she came to the note and once more translated it. You have done an amazing job, Nancy, said Teresa. As for that burial mound, I can't wait to see it. She determined that as soon as the present dig site had been thoroughly excavated, she would ask for permission to work on the new one. All the young people said they would like to join in the expedition. Todd remarked, I doubt that what we'll find will be as valuable as this hunting horn. But much older, Julie Ann reminded him. She was standing very close to Art, and from the looks they were exchanging, Nancy was sure they were now very good friends. "We have a surprise for you, Nancy," Art said. "We found the rest of the baby's skeleton that matched the fingers and forearm you unearthed." "Great," Nancy said, "and thanks for finishing my job." Bess gave a little shudder. "I'm glad I wasn't there when you brought it up. That poor little baby." A short time later, Bert and Bob arrived in a state trooper's car. A rousing cheer went up for Bob. When the acclaim subsided, the boys reported that the two fake guards were in jail. "I called my parents," said Bob. "Nancy, they're very grateful to you and your friends for rescuing me. And I am too." He and Bert were told of the capture of Cadel and his companion. "That's a relief," said Bob. "I never want to be kidnapped again." Stories were exchanged by diggers, treasure hunters, and Bob Snell. It seemed unbelievable that so many things had occurred during one morning. Nancy had a suggestion. "Let's ask the state for permission to donate the lead plates to Paulson University." Teresa smiled. "They'll be delighted to receive them." That evening after supper, Nancy said, "Since it's a beautiful clear night and there are no longer kidnappers or thieves around, I'd like to go to town and phone my father, my Aunt Eloise, and Boise Osborne." Art offered his motorcycle to her and Ned. "And we should stop and tell Clem," Nancy said. When she telephoned Boise Osborne, he was so amazed he almost lost his voice. "You've actually tracked down the message in the hollow oak and found a treasure!" he exclaimed. "Well, my congratulations, Nancy, and please stay at the dig until I come out and see everything. To tell the truth, I'm very much embarrassed that my friends and I weren't able to solve this mystery." "All you needed was more time," Nancy told him kindly. "Now that my work here is finished, I'll have to get home. When can you come?" "I'll take a plane tonight," was the quick answer. Mr. Drew, Hannah Gruen, and Aunt Eloise were equally amazed. All praised the young detective, but she insisted that her friends deserved a great deal of credit for solving the mystery. On the way back to the dig, Nancy and Ned stopped at Clem's house. The old farmer's astonishment was immense. He thumped his thighs and danced around with as much glee as if he had found the message and treasure himself. "That beats all," he said. "I'll be up tomorrow morning to see that there hunting horn. You folks sure brought excitement to this place. We haven't had so much going on around here since one of the town girls eloped with the postmaster's son." Embarrassed by Clem's comment, Nancy and Ned smiled. By noontime the next day, the farmhouse and yard were full of visitors. Not only were Clem and his wife there, but Mr. Drew, Aunt Eloise, and all the members of the New York Detectives Club. Nancy blushed at the praise showered on her. "Nancy, after meeting with my friends, we voted unanimously to make you an honorary member of our club." For a moment, Nancy felt like crying, but she regained her composure and thanked them all. "This is a marvelous honor," she said, then chuckled. With a wink at Boise Osborne, she said, "Any time I can help you on such a fascinating mystery as this one, let me know." Everyone laughed and applauded. Nancy's next case did not come through Boise, but it proved to be a particularly intriguing one, called The Mystery of the Ivory Charm. Teresa now stepped forward and put one hand on Nancy's shoulder. "I hurried into town this morning," she said, "and made some phone calls. I have permission from the property owners to dig the mound discovered by Pierre Francois. It is probably a Hopewell burial. Paulson University has promised to finance the expedition, and I am to lead it. Nancy, I want you to have the honor of digging the first shovelful of dirt." Again, everyone clapped, and Nancy gave Teresa a hug and whispered, "I'll never forget this wonderful experience as long as I live." And here's the postscript. The Hopewell Mound was excavated the following summer and found to contain many perfectly preserved artifacts and fossils, including several bird effigies, so like statues of birds, or kind of just representations of birds, in stone, and a rare baby's cradle. At a luncheon celebration which followed the event, Nancy was praised for having added valuable information to the archaeological knowledge of America. With a smile, she said, "All of the credit belongs to Pierre Francois and his message in the hollow oak." And that's the end of the book. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed reading it to you. And I will see you again soon with a new book. Love you.